Falcon!
Tatsuki Fujimoto has been a mangaka I've definitely been keeping my eye on recently. I first found out about him through his manga Chainsaw Man, which I did a recommendation for a while back, which is an awesome series I really enjoyed for its unique setting, characters, character designs, as well as just overall being rad as fuck. So after reading Chainsaw Man, I immediately decided to check out Fujimoto's debut work, Fire Punch. And wow, what a ride it was. This series took me a week to finish, and I'm sure an 83 chapter long series might seem easy breezy for a lot of other people out there, but for me personally that's something noteworthy, as I usually tend to take my time with reading manga. So for me to finish it that quickly, it's definitely a sign of something special for me. Now the story of Fire Punch takes place in a world where a being known as the Ice Witch turned the world into a frozen wasteland, leading to worldwide famine, desperation, and violence. Over the years, some people gained strange powers known as blessings, which brings us to our main character, Agni, a young man who's a bit too close to his little sister, living in a small rundown village. Agni and his sister are blessed with the power of regeneration, and in order to sustain their village, use their blessing to provide food by chopping up their body parts. It's some pretty brutal stuff. However, things all go to hell when a group of soldiers come into Agni's village, seeking for some potential blessed recruits for their army. However, once the army discovers that the villagers are cannibals, a soldier by the name of Doma uses his incineration blessing to wipe out Agni's village. Burning in intense fire, Agni reaches out to his dying sister, whose final words to him are simply, to live. Sad, confused, and enraged, Agni lies there burning in what seems like hellfire as Doma's flames don't go out till its victims are dead. With his sister's words echoing in his mind, Agni, for 8 years, suffers and burns until he can properly move again, and then sets out on a quest to kill Doma, eventually becoming known as the legendary Fire Punch. Agni's journey for revenge takes him in a variety of wild directions, each more crazier and unpredictable than the last, all while he teeters on the edge of the mental and physical breaking point. This series is absolutely insane, and I was hooked from the first chapter, which was just such a strong opening. Interesting world building, raw, intense moments of rage and despair, as well as an overall uneasy sense of dread throughout. It was really hard for me personally to put this series down after the first chapter, as on top of all that tone and build-up, there's just the character of Agni, who after that first chapter you are rooting for endlessly, as he goes through some serious hardcore shit throughout this series, and you just want to see him be happy in the end of the day. As to be Agni is to be in constant agony. By the end of the first chapter, the man loses everything dear to him and is engulfed by an undying flame that took him 8 damn years to at least somewhat function properly. The burning pain never leaves him throughout the series, and he's practically torn to shreds in every chapter, all of which he has to painfully regenerate from. And that's just the physical strain, as there's also the constant mental strain on Agni in order to just find the will to live after all the constant physical abuse he already has to go through. After losing his sister and being surrounded by Doma's flames, Agni is truly isolated, as anything he touches will burn until it's nothing but ashes. And as Agni gets closer to his vengeance, he begins to wonder if it's all worth it in the end after all the chaos that follows him. While Agni is the main focus of the series, Fire Punch does have a great cast of characters. What I enjoy about Fujimoto's works, from what I've seen so far, is that he makes characters feel like genuine people, despite all of their absurdities and powers. He does this mainly through the dialogue and facial expressions of the characters, as it just goes the extra step in making them feel like real people, whether it be having some true heart-to-hearts, outbursts of emotions, or just straight up having characters fumble their words and sentences. Now there are a good amount of other series and creators that also pull off the same effect, but personally there's something a bit more unique about the way Fujimoto does it, as in his series it's just a bit more offbeat, in which it's sort of hard to explain if you haven't really read any of Fujimoto's series, but because of the tones and unpredictability of his series, you sort of never really know what his characters are going to do or say next, which in a way sort of adds to that realism. However, another character that's worth mentioning in this recommendation is Togata, an eccentric movie buff in a world that barely knows anything about movies, who after having her collection destroyed by soldiers, decides to make a movie of her own, and after hearing about Agni, decides to film him and his journey to kill Doma. She's also blessed with regeneration abilities, and with years of experience, teaches Agni how to fight. She's a pretty great character, whose eccentric tone adds a lot of levity to the series, and while being taken in a lot of unique directions herself, some of which I could see some people not entirely 100% enjoying, but overall I felt that her character was handled really well, and she also has some really cool fight scenes under her belt. Due to her being older and a lot more experienced, her fights differ from Agni, who sort of just charges in punching and burning everything in sight. Whereas Togata's fights are a lot more in line with the Hollywood movies she enjoys so much. And with her regenerative abilities, combat skills, and constant movie references, it almost comes off as Deadpool-like. And considering some of the superhero movie references of this series, that might be intentional? But speaking of the action, with a title like Fire Punch, you'd expect constant, non-stop, hot-blooded fights. However, in terms of major big fights, there aren't really a whole lot. But when we do get a big fight, they are fantastic. Powers in this series are kept simple and aren't over-explained, which really helps the flow of the battles between blessed characters. Regeneration abilities are up there with psychic powers as some of my favorite to see utilized in fight scenes, as personally I feel they lead to a lot of creativity in battles. Take for example a fight where Agni is launched into space, and the only real way for him to save himself is to tear off his head, only to regenerate as he falls back down to the ground, in which his newly restored body then crumbles upon impact, only for him to continue regenerating in order to get back to the fight. It's some brutal stuff and I love it. The action when presented is really well done, with some pretty explosive battles with impressive scale of destruction. Awesome layouts of panels showing the true impact and fluidity of the action, and really the paneling here when going through the series another time to get pictures for this video is just really well done. One of my favorites actually being a pretty brief moment of Togata driving a truck and dealing with a small wave of soldiers one by one, killing them or getting killed by them only to regenerate and repeat while taking some of their guns and cigarettes along the way. It's a pretty minor scene overall, though it lasts like 7 pages, but the way it was paneled and presented was super memorable. Outside the action, this series' unique paneling really helps drive in the fear, intensity, and sadness of a lot of the scenes here, a lot of which I had to stop and admire a bit when skimming through this series for the video. And with all that said, as you can tell, I really love this manga. I might even consider it one of my favorites. However, it's definitely not for everyone. Despite how brutal it is, this series is also pretty absurd. Yet characters making all these movie references. I mean, a character's motive for their action in this series is straight up just being pissed off that they couldn't see the latest Star Wars movie. And then you got some wacko characters like this guy who's wearing nothing but an iron mask and underwear in a frozen wasteland. Not to mention the just pure unpredictability of this series, as every time you feel like you know where the series is going, it just automatically fire punches you in the face. And while not entirely ruining my personal experience with the series, there were some plot elements and characters I felt could have had a little bit more attention given to them, and while I was satisfied with it, I could see a lot of people having a tough time with the ending of the series. And you know what? That's all fine, but the one thing I do not like seeing regarding people talking about this manga is when people just chalk up Fire Punch to be nothing but edgy schlock, when I feel this series and even Chainsaw Man are a lot more than that. Edgy, pun slightly intended, is a term I feel that's really lost its edge over the years, as almost anything with a little death and dark moments can be deemed edgy by the masses. Which, I don't know, I feel that things are only truly edgy if they have no substance to them, only being dark for just the pure shock factor alone. Fire Punch is a dark, violent, and tragic series with tons of painful and cruel moments, but there's substance to it with Agni as well as a few other characters' journey throughout the series. Despite everything, Fire Punch never truly lies into being overtly dark, as the violence never feels too gory, and despite rape and a few other things being brought up throughout the series, it's never really fully shown. And that could be while despite some explicit material, Fire Punch was still in a shonen magazine. But I feel that even without that barrier, the series would still overall restrict itself from anything too overboard. And again, we have all that absurdity I mentioned earlier, so it's not like this series was really leaning towards the edge anyways. But another important point that a lot of people sort of use to deem this series as edgy is that the story as it goes on starts taking jabs into religion, and in a lot of other series that tend to do this, I sort of just roll my eyes. While it could be that I came from a household of faith, but when a lot of these series try talking about religion, it just usually comes off as really half-baked. However, in Fire Punch, the nihilism feels just as the characters and dialogue of the series, in that it just comes off as very genuine and real. While I might not agree with its nihilistic message, I definitely did feel that this series wasn't trying to be edgy at all for it, but rather reflecting the characters, the world, and possibly Fujimoto's own ideals. But yeah, Fire Punch is a new favorite of mine, for its unique premise, dark story, absolutely tragic main character, a cast of characters that despite their oddities, feel real, and some really well crafted action and terror. If anything I said during this video interests you, which judging from my subscribers and what they really respond to, I guarantee is a lot of people watching this video, then I highly recommend checking Fire Punch out if you haven't already. With that, I am Mr. Falconpunch. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.